Hi, I'm Andy the Bunker Dweller. And wow, this channel has sure changed a lot in the past year and a half. I've written, edited, and uploaded quite a lot over the course of 2022, and even from years prior. So today I've decided to make a little catch-up video, kind of to look back and respond to some of my old content that people really want me to follow up on. I get a lot of comments, and unfortunately I'm unable to respond to all of them. Think of this video as kind of an attempt to do that, or at least me addressing some of the big topics that you guys brought up. Also, to preface this, I will not be covering every single video. Of my old videos, I'm only able to cover a few of them. And another thing I should mention right away, I will not be discussing my Halo videos. Because there's so much discussion and stuff to follow up on, that'll be its own video. Those two reviews had a lot of good discussion, and I do want to bring that up at some point. But it sadly won't be in this video. So sorry to anyone who's here for that. I'm actually going to quick outline the exact structure of this video, because we don't have a lot of time, and there's going to be a lot of stuff to cover. First, I'm going to answer some questions. These are questions that I got directly from my patrons on Patreon. I'm still figuring out how to do Q&A stuff, and the best I figured out was to maybe include questions in this video. To be honest, I just don't get a lot of Q&A stuff, so hey, if you have questions, just send them my way, and I'll eventually get around to answering them. But yeah, I've got a few big questions that I want to answer that also kind of tie in with the rest of the video. Secondly, I'm going to talk about some super old videos. These are videos pre-hiatus, and I'm not going to cover all of my pre-hiatus videos, but at least a few of the big ones. At least videos that I have some more information on, or videos that I just want to follow up on. These are videos that high school and college freshman Andy had made, so they're kind of interesting. Lastly, for the rest of the video, I'm going to be talking about all of my 2022 retrospectives. The reason I'm cutting it off at 2022 is because, if I'm being real here, 2023 is way too recent in my brain, and there's still so much developing stuff going on with a lot of that content. Same reason for why I'm not covering my Halo videos, because again, I'm still getting more new information. So yeah, that's how this video is going to be structured, and I'm going to have a time code for every single video in the description. So feel free to browse at your own pace. With that, let's begin. What was your favorite game of the last decade from 2010 to 2019? Also, what has been your favorite game so far this decade? Man, this is definitely a hard one. 2010 to 2019 was a rough decade for gaming, at least in my opinion, so most of my favorite games were actually indies. If I had to pick a definitive best of the decade game, I'd probably say Doom 2016. I don't think enough people realize how influential of a game it was, and it really was a turning point for the industry, especially the FPS genre. I kind of feel that Doom may have single-handedly killed off those typical lazy linear rollercoaster ride movie games that had plagued the 2010s. Your stuff like Medal of Honor Warfighter, or your Order 1886, or your Killzone. Now we do have stragglers, but they're mostly relegated to the PlayStation, but that entire subgenre of games pretty much died overnight. And I attribute that to Doom 2016. And I like to think that AAA FPS games have been better off. I literally look at modern FPS games pre and post 2016 now because of it. And obviously, yeah, we still get those bad games every now and then. But with Doom, it kind of forced a lot of developers to step up their game into making something more engaging, as opposed to lazily copying Call of Duty or Gears of War. An action game that we consider to be middling right now would be fucking revolutionary had it been released 10 years ago. So yeah, Doom was pretty important. As for this decade, I'm sorry, I don't think I've had enough time to appreciate recent games. I've beaten Doom Eternal, I haven't finished any of the DLCs, and from what I've experienced, I really enjoyed the game. It was very good. The only problem was that it actually crashed on me at one point, and for like a month I could not launch the game whatsoever. Like seriously, it would crash on the menu. At some point it fixed itself, and now it works, but if I'm being fully honest, that lost a lot of goodwill from me, which is a shame because I do enjoy most of it, even if I'm not a fan of how little ammo it gives you. There are a few indies that are sadly stuck in early access that I refuse to play until they're finished. I enjoyed quite a few games very recently, but a lot of that could just be recency bias. I need time to let those games simmer in my brain for a bit. I'd say that maybe of the games I've played in the last couple years, I think Metroid Dread might be up there. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I loved it enough to the point where I'm probably going to make a video on it at some point. With Dread, it was great too, because as a Metroid fan, I'm just happy that the franchise is back to being alive again. Because now we have Prime Remastered and confirmation that Prime 4 is still being developed. I think the Metroid franchise might finally be back in business, which I am 100% here for. Any chance we'll see a retrospective of Bungie from their humble beginnings to their golden age, with Halo, then to the corporatization and fall from grace with Destiny. I saw a lot of 343 industry shills saying you're a Bungie simp, but I remember you making fun of new Bungie as well in your Halo 4 video. I do find it funny that I still see the Bungie simp thing pop up every now and then. I constantly talk about how even Bungie wasn't infallible. I am just as critical to modern Bungie as I am to 343. I just recognize that at some point in time, Bungie objectively made some great games. To add on, the whole simping for a developer thing also doesn't make any sense to me anymore, especially in the modern day. In the old days, sure, studios used to be a lot smaller, and they were consistent in their work and output. They would go from game to game, and you could see their fingerprints. If I pick up Wolfenstein, or Doom, or Quake, I can feel John Romero and John Carmack's influence across all of them. Nowadays, developers are just soulless companies. Like, they're massive studios with thousands of people working for them. Like, most of the time, you can't even tell that they're made by the same people. It also definitely doesn't help that they're very corporatized these days. They're just full of middle managers and corporate hires, mostly through nepotism. Meanwhile, the creatives and programmers are mostly low-level people who will get let go if a game doesn't sell that well. Hey, did you guys know that the people who worked at Creative Assembly during their development of Alien Isolation literally aren't working at the studio anymore? So it's fucking stupid when people ask for an Isolation 2, because it'll be a completely different group of people making it, just with the same fucking company name. That's basically Bungie to me. The people who made Halo what it was are long gone, and the Bungie that remains is just a different company full of different people. It's why I think people who simp for any company are fucking stupid. You're simping for a name and a logo. Like, dude, what are you doing? As for doing a full Bungie retrospective, I'm sorry, probably not. I'm definitely fascinated with early Bungie as a very interesting studio. Their titles such as Pathways into Darkness, Myth, and especially Marathon really showed their influence and creativity. Marathon, for whatever reason, has seen a big revival on the internet, given that quite a few people have uncovered the deep lore that Bungie wove into it. Although I strongly disagree that it ties into Halo. Knowing Bungie, it's clear that everything is just a cheeky reference and nod, nothing physically connecting the two universes. I do plan on making videos on old Halo though. I'm talking the classic Bungie games, but that's probably where I'll stop. Destiny 1 and 2 hold very little relevance to me. I've tried getting into Destiny 2 multiple times and I just can't, and given how many times they've removed content from the game, I literally can't do a full retrospective. Not that the game was that enjoyable anyways. When your massive AAA $500 million game is still not as good as Warframe, you're probably doing something wrong. Also, a Marathon reboot was announced this year as a PvP extraction shooter. Ugh. That just might be the most despicable thing Bungie has done for a while. Literally, everyone loves Marathon for its single player and story. And yeah, it had an added-on multiplayer mode, but it wasn't the crux of the game. Why you turn something like Marathon into a Tarkov clone just feels so stupid to me. Maybe it's a sign that Destiny isn't bringing in the money anymore. I don't know. If Bungie ever decides to make a good, mission-focused linear single-player game, I might be interested, but from the looks of it, that won't be anytime soon. Do you have any plans to do a full retrospective for Metroid Prime Trilogy? A full trilogy retrospective. That's a lot to talk about. I might. I actually might just do it. Definitely on Prime 1 and Prime 2. Those are two games that I really enjoyed and I have a bit to say on them. Otherwise, Prime 3, I don't know if I have as much to say. But don't get me wrong, they're all good games, and I'd love to do full videos on them. I have no idea how long it'll take me to get around to that. Maybe it'll be my next big project in the future. We'll see. Hey, I already want to make a video on Metroid Dread, so I guess covering the Prime games wouldn't be too different. Anyway, that's kind of a good segue though, because this kind of ties into the topic of this video, following up my old content and responding to comments and subjects you guys brought up. Alright, so I kind of have to address the elephant in the room. What the hell happened to my old videos? They got nuked from orbit, that's what happened. Now, a lot of my old videos, I just decided to unlist some of them. If I'm being honest, they're kind of embarrassing. I was literally a high schooler making most of those, so what do you expect? They were definitely cringy, but a handful of them were actually pretty helpful in solidifying what I wanted from this channel. I don't hate them, I don't even want to denounce them. I had fun making them, and they got me to where I am now. They are what they are, and I respect that people enjoyed them, but it's content that I don't make anymore. Honestly, the early years of this channel, I had no friggin' clue what I was doing. Just making inane uploads to try and get views. Since then, I've definitely gotten better in my writing and editing, so I've mostly left my old videos and that type of content behind. However, I've left some of these videos merely unlisted, and they can still be accessed via a dedicated playlist. The reason I chose this is because I knew some people enjoy watching my old content, and I didn't want to fully delete it. I felt that'd be a waste. But I also didn't want my old high school videos clogging up my channel feed. So I'll leave it here for everyone to enjoy. It's a good compromise. But those are only the videos that survived. I guess I was just way too loosey-goosey with copyrighted music. Now videos like my Far Cry 2 retrospective are just gone. Like, seriously, that one's not even privated or unlisted. That shit got fucking obliterated. I'm actually considering redoing some of these videos, more so in revisiting a few particular games, with better editing and better writing. But I have so much on my plate already that I don't know if I'll ever even get around to that. So don't be on the edge of your seat waiting for another Czar video. But yeah, my old content. Mostly cringy, kind of embarrassing, but I do value them as stepping stones to where I am today. Without them, I would not have learned video editing, and I definitely wouldn't have learned how to manage an audience. So for that, I do appreciate them. However, a handful of those old videos I at least want to follow up on, if very briefly. So here we go. This is going to be a lightning round. I don't have much to say here aside from the fact that I find it hilarious that Ross Scott would make a video about this years later as well. Hell, I think he made a better review than I did. Although, if I could critique something, it would be the fact that I think he went in with way too high expectations. Hellgate London is a dungeon party-based MMO, not a story-driven single-player RPG. So things like writing and quest design were something that was unsurprising to me, as a guy who played lots of cheap MMOs back in the day. I went in expecting WoW, not Diablo. I do 100% agree with him though. The padding is fucking rough. Hellgate was definitely a missed opportunity where it absolutely could have created its own little niche of unique MMO gameplay. Hell, I still think with a bit of touches, the game could have had its own smaller but dedicated following. But its overuse of repeated levels and padding really hurt it in the long run. Although there is something he brought up in the video that I noticed as well, which is that the Steam copy of Hellgate London has fucked mouse input. Seriously, something about it is completely off. I don't think it's an acceleration issue, it literally feels like my mouse is broken or there's dirt on the mouse pad. However, this is exclusive to the Steam copy. You see, when I made my video on Hellgate London, the game was essentially abandonware. There was no Steam release, and I had to play it through a fan-made launcher. And that version that I played, as best as I can remember, had perfect mouse input. Seriously, I never had any trouble with it. Since making that video, Hellgate was brought back to Steam, and the second I loaded it up, I felt the horrible mouse input. So clearly something changed between these versions. I'd be curious to know if there were any patches or mods to fix this, but I don't know. It's one of the few games where I want to see someone tackle the same concept but with a better vision. I don't want randomized dungeons or really bad padding. Just give me a post-apocalyptic MMO that lets you travel through the subway tunnel and occasionally on the surface. Although I guess that just makes me want a Metro 2033 MMO, huh? Which, hey, speaking of the old reviews that I've made, I'm definitely considering on revisiting this one. When I made this, Metro Exodus wasn't even announced yet, which I think the very first trailer dropped like a year later, so talk about bad timing. People have asked, and yes, I have played Exodus. I enjoyed it, and I might make an eventual review about it. Who can say? Exodus wasn't exactly the open world Metro game I described wanting. In reality, the open world game I really want from this franchise is a giant sprawling Moscow metro tunnel system that you can fully explore, as well as maybe occasionally venture up onto the surface. Dimitri Glukhovsky gave very detailed descriptions of his world. I would love to see this map fully explorable. Give me some Fallout mechanics, like being able to work with certain factions and expand territory. It could be a dream game. You see, the beauty to Metro is the pure terror of not being able to comprehend what lies ahead. It'd be the pure terror of having to travel from one station to another, going through a dark tunnel and not knowing what's out there. Maybe it's bandits, maybe it's mutants, maybe it's some reality-breaking anomaly. Making it an open world and giving the player the freedom to choose where they can go would make for a legendary horror game. Alas, I'm not sure if Metro will ever fully commit to the concept, which I get, it's a pretty out there idea. I feel bad because I do enjoy what Exodus is, a slightly open-ended linear campaign. I think too many people see it as an open world, which it really isn't, only in parts. Anyway, I'd still love another Metro game. Exodus leaves it up to a sequel, which I would love to see. Although given 4A Games' desire to move beyond Metro, I wouldn't blame them if they made a completely different IP, which honestly, I'd still be pretty excited over. I'm interested to see where they're going to go from here, so I only wish them the best of luck. Oh man, if there's one video I could go back and redo, it'd probably be this one. I don't have much to say here except for pointing out that I think people were convinced that I hated Fall of Cybertron, which in fairness, I came off as a little too harsh towards. I need to clarify, I really like Fall, just not as much as War. They're both great games, it's just that I think War had far more solid gameplay and level design. But that's neither here nor there. I find it neat how over the years these games still retain a pretty strong following, despite their hard to acquire status. Fall of Cybertron still has a somewhat active multiplayer scene, which kind of makes it a shame that it's not even listed anymore. Maybe one day the rights will be sorted out and we'll still be able to play these games on Steam, but who knows. With how Hasbro's operating, I doubt that's ever going to happen. Alright, last of my old videos. Clutch. Oh man, well this is a video where I can say that in hindsight, I was right. At least mostly right, according to a commenter. My guess was that it was originally like a death race inspired car combat game that focused on you running down random people, just like Carmageddon. Well, it turns out I may have hit the nail on the head. According to a commenter, he said that the game was actually a victim of government censorship. It apparently drew the attention of bad press and non-gaming outlets, and even politicians, with a few threats of lawsuits. So because of that, the devs had to change the game into a zombie killing game instead. But it doesn't stop there. Apparently this spiraled out of control and resulted in a feeding frenzy where more and more people wanted a piece of the dev team. It was people just latching onto the controversy. Some psychiatrists were claiming that the developers must clearly be mentally ill if they were making such a violent game, although I question the validity of their medical credentials. And this apparently just kept snowballing until sponsors pulled funding and the game had to be finished right then and there. He also mentions that there might have been technical issues plaguing the development, but he can't recall the details. This story was fascinating and I would love to hear more details. It's going off of one person's word, but if anyone else could corroborate, I would love to do a full deep dive on it. Although it does make a lot of sense. The game was very clearly censored, and more specifically, in a sloppy and hastily done way. It also feels very light on content and feels heavily unfinished. So there's a lot of evidence to that story being true. Except I simply don't speak any Russian, so I gotta rely on other people to parse that info for me. But damn, it's sad to hear how these poor developers got marred in controversy, probably because a few scummy journalists just needed a punching bag. I was actually going to use this segment to make a joke about how hilariously sensitive people like this are, and how weird it is that there were people in Russia years ago who were calling for these developers to be thrown in a mental home just for making a slightly edgy video game, kind of as a way to laugh it off as if things are better now. Except, just my luck, I think the same thing has happened like 3 times in the past 6 months here in the US. So a while ago, I saw a teaser for a new game called Unrecord, a body cam police game that aims to mimic the look and feel of a chest-mounted body camera, with photorealistic graphics that are so good, it tricked people into thinking it was real life. The dev even had to come out and prove that it was all in-engine. Wow. Technically, this is incredible. I don't even know if it's something I'd play, but it does look cool. Yet, even this game now has people outraged against it, saying that it's too realistic, or that it having you play as a cop is offensive to real-world events, that is grounded in violence and it's going to train people into becoming violent killers. I just roll my eyes at stuff like this because I've been hearing this shit for decades. The idea that a game will turn people into violent serial killers, a claim that has never once happened and it doesn't even hold water. The cop thing also kind of confuses me because there's lots of other games that let you play as cops. Rainbow Six is still popular. I don't see anyone boycotting that game. Hell, I've been playing SWAT 4 for years. Not a peep regarding that one either. And I can't even list the amount of military shooters that had you play as a soldier. Is being a soldier better than a cop now? I don't know. So to me, this feels like controversy just out of nowhere. Simply because I think the game's small developer is an easy target. These people wouldn't be caught dead trying to protest a company like Blizzard and Activision. Yeah, that company. This company right here, which has a body count, by the way. No, instead, let's target some tiny little studio. If they were genuinely concerned about their ideals, why not go for the bigger target? Because they don't have any ideals. They're all phonies who just like to dogpile on controversies. Or hey, another game that got a similar treatment, Hogwarts Legacy. Now this one wasn't due to violence, rather it was guilt by association. Apparently Harry Potter is now an evil, untouchable franchise because of J.K. Rowling, who seems to be persona non grata thanks to her tweets. I don't think she killed anybody, or even tried to kill anybody, best I can tell, and she didn't even have a hand in making the game also. It's just that everyone connected to the Harry Potter IP now has guilt by association. What's fascinating though, is that this controversy I think had a complete Streisand effect. The Harry Potter IP was pretty much dead at this point, with some bad movies, an old book series that people had grown up from, yet the controversy surrounding this game, which came out of complete fucking nowhere, probably made the brand more popular than ever. I'm not even a Harry Potter fan, but as an outsider, someone who doesn't even care about Harry Potter, the fact that I was constantly hearing about this game should be a sign of how popular it was. It apparently sold really well, and it really showed how little a boycott affects a game's sales. This controversy really spiraled out of control. People were getting harassed, streamers got doxxed for playing it. Someone literally made a website to track people who stream the game, just to identify them and place them into some ominous database. Once again, a lot of these people were silent on other controversies, like Blizzard Activision. Literally, I saw people denouncing Hogwarts Legacy, who then at the same time were playing stuff like Overwatch or Diablo. So, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I never cared one way or the other about Hogwarts Legacy, although if one group of people is consistently harassing and doxing individuals entirely for just playing a video game, then sorry, but I'm never going to support you, and I'm never going to be on your side. If anything, you're just proving that you're psychotic and you get a kick out of harassing people. To me, these controversies were incredible to see. It felt like I was living in the early 2000s again, like Jack Thompson had risen from his dead career to wreak havoc over the games industry. Except these aren't religious outsiders anymore. These are industry people. These are fellow developers and content creators, all demanding boycotts for their competition. Hell, one fucking developer I saw criticizing Unrecord was a fucking Battlefield developer. Yeah, a game series which is, let's be frank, kind of American propaganda. It's still fun. It's still good. I love Bad Company. But that game was funded by the US military. And he was salty that a game was depicting the police like this. I don't even know what these people want anymore. The Hogwarts Legacy situation is even more hilarious because the original Harry Potter books were targeted by Christian groups for promoting witchcraft. The irony of people starting witch hunts over a game whose franchise used to be boycotted for being witchcraft is not lost on me. Man, I'm sorry guys for dragging current events into this, especially shit that's many months old by now. But I just had to bring up the parallels of how over 10 years later, this same fake outrage is still happening over video games. I also try not to be political, and you know what? I don't think this should be political in the slightest, because it's apolitical. I know that because I regularly see people on both sides of the political spectrum talking about how video games are evil or satanic, or they're too violent, or they're too blah blah blah. So to me, I think that alone proves it's not a political discussion, but rather just a general media censorship one. A video game has never killed or harmed someone, so there's no debate here. It's fiction, and it's not reality. To make an actual point, I am very lax when it comes to my standards on what games should and shouldn't be allowed to exist. I make fun of bad games all the time, but I never advocate for their complete destruction, or the arrest of their fucking developers. I think all games, especially bad games, deserve to at least exist. If nothing else, they're just a good lesson to learn from. I think most people would agree with me. Bad games can exist. But what I wish those same people would also agree on is that if bad games can exist, so can games made in bad taste. Edgy games will always be made. There will always be games that offend people. There will always be games that will try to elicit a reaction from you. Fucking shit like Postal or Hatred caused such stupid controversies back in their day that in hindsight, they just seem so pointless. These are games that were meant to stir up a reaction. And they worked, because you fuckers fell for it. Oh my god, games are going to cause violence and these developers are evil. Oh, shut it. I think it affects me more than most because I love gaming as a medium. Video games are fascinating to me, and I especially love seeing weird and obscure games, even if I don't enjoy them, or even games that are made in bad taste that I don't support. I think every game deserves to exist. Short of games that are like hidden crypto miners or ones that hack into your IP address, those are what we call viruses. I'm totally fine with those being banned. But a game that looks like a realistic body cam game, this isn't even a game in bad taste, it's ambitious, and it's doing something unique and creative. I'll end my rant right here. I find it sad how little we've come in the year since Clutch's controversy. It was a game that was attacked by the Russian media for being too violent, and now we see the exact same thing happening here too. It's so dumb. God damn, leave it to me to go into a long tangent in a fucking follow-up video. Well, to wrap it up on a more positive note, this developer, the same people who made Clutch, are apparently still making stuff. I don't know about their latest game, but the game before that was Crossout. It's a car combat game, kind of like World of Tanks, but you can build and customize your cars. You get the basic gist. It wasn't really my cup of tea. However, I was actually told to check out some of the games they made before making Clutch, that being Hard Truck Apocalypse and its expansion. Apparently, Crossout is set in the same universe as these games. Although, instead of being a multiplayer game, Hard Truck Apocalypse is a single-player car combat RPG, all about buying new vehicles and upgrading them with new parts and weapons, all set in a post-apocalyptic world to drive through. Oh, hell yeah. I played it, and you know what? I'm probably going to make a video on it. No idea when, but it's definitely in the list of games I want to cover. With that, we've finished my old videos. Again, a lot of them were messy and hastily written, and going back, I would definitely revise a lot of stuff. Even still, I had fun making them. I learned a lot from these videos. After Clutch though, I went on a pretty long and unintentional hiatus for a few years. This was because I was busy with work and college. Seriously, things just caught up with me. So for a while, this channel was kind of dead. You guys probably remember that. However, in an attempt to make a comeback video, or comeback videos, I tried to make some more straightforward reviews, as opposed to my usual weird, obscure game retrospectives. I don't have anything to really say about Condemned, Halo CE maybe some stuff to add, but I mostly stand by those videos as attempts for me to do more review-focused content, which is ultimately what made me make my Halo 4 and Halo Infinite reviews. But yeah, these two videos were just kind of experiments, and even though I definitely could have done a better job on them, I'm still pretty satisfied with how they turned out. I still love Condemned. It's still an amazing, spooky horror game. I saw a lot of people not know that there exists a patch for both Condemned and Fear that fixed the frame rate issue. It's a quick install, and I'm glad I helped people figure that out. Quite a few people did say that Condemned 2 isn't that bad, and that I should probably cover it. Maybe. Although, I'll admit, I have little interest in actually playing it. Maybe if it ever came to PC, but I doubt that'll ever happen. One of these days I might get a copy for Xbox and try and stomach my way through it, but that's definitely not a priority. With my Halo video, I think I need to clarify something. That Combat Evolved video was made just out of the blue, just because I had finally returned to the franchise years and years after I'd left it. You see, after Halo 4, I just took a break from Halo. I saw what was happening with 5 and I just stopped caring. The 360 was the last console I had before I switched over to PC. And in doing so, I started playing some older PC FPS games. I started out with a cheap laptop and an early toaster PC, so older FPS games were all I could run. But yeah, during this time is when I fully moved into PC gaming, where I am to this day. So when this video was even made, Halo probably hadn't been a part of my life for many, many years. I enjoyed it growing up, but where I was then, it just wasn't that important to me. It wasn't relevant. I just want people to know that. Another thing people might not know about that video is that came out before MCC was even on PC. As in, I legitimately hadn't touched any other Halo game for probably at least like 5 or 10 years. So a lot of my opinions from finally having those older games fresh in my memory have definitely changed since I made that first Halo Combat Evolved video. Since playing Halo 2 or Halo 3 or ODST or Reach, finally giving those a fresh look again. Yeah, I definitely have different opinions on Combat Evolved. So at some point, I'm probably going to revisit it. I also kind of want to reclaim Halo, no pun intended, at least for my channel, because having two negative two-parter reviews certainly doesn't give people the impression that I love the series. On the contrary, I love Halo. At least the older games under Bungie's care. So I'm hoping that in future videos I'll be able to talk more about the Halo that I loved, the old Halo. And yes, I will return to Combat Evolved at some point. My plan is to talk about the Bungie games, and once I finish, wrap it all the way back around with a CE revisit. The Combat Evolved video does hold some opinions that I still have, but quite a few of them have definitely changed. I mean, hey, what can I say? Having had a chance to revisit the entire series has given me a lot to think about. And I have a lot to say. My thoughts on Halo have grown. Also, that video's script was very messy and was written scattered across my time studying abroad. Literally, I wrote it in between my classes in Poland. So I think it deserves a more dedicated retrospective. Suffice to say, I am not done with Halo, nor is Halo done with me. After these videos from Halo and Condemned, which themselves were a year apart from one another, I once again just went on hiatus. Again, I never meant to. I think I just had writer's block and I've struggled to write and finish even a full video script. But trust me, I was coming up with so many video ideas during this time. Mostly just partially written scripts that I never got around to finishing. At least for a while. In my free time, I would add to each script piece by piece, but sadly I would never get that far. It's only been very recently that I finally got around to these scripts and actually finished them. Stuff like Abuse or Prime Hunters or Redline or Test Drive Unlimited. It wasn't until over a year after my Condemned video where I finally decided to get off my ass and finish one of my video scripts. I also really pushed myself into making sure I would upload another video right after, just to make sure that I would upload videos one after another and I wouldn't go back on hiatus. It gave me a video uploading streak that I thankfully haven't broken since. So with that, let's get into my more recent content. The videos I feel most of you discovered this channel from. So let's start with my first video back. Abuse. This was my comeback video, and even now I kind of wish I could redo it. It was a fun video to make, although very rough in parts. I was still trying to figure out my speaking style, my audio settings hadn't quite been refined yet. Honestly, the best thing about that video was my script, and even then I wish I could still redo it. I find it satisfying that a lot of people did agree with me in regards to Abuse's control scheme, which I still consider to be the best part about the game. I also need to clarify, I have no problems playing 2D side-scrollers with a gamepad. The traditional Metroid style of aiming, I can usually get the hang of. Plenty of great games have it. However, mouse and keyboard is my go-to, which is why Abuse felt so amazing to play. It's hard and psychotic, but the controls being as good as they were definitely made up for it. So I appreciate that most people seem to be on my side in regard to the controls debate. A game someone recommended to me was Butcher, which seems to be the closest thing we have to an Abuse spiritual successor. It definitely plays way faster, but tone-wise and controls-wise, it's spot on. My one critique is that even though the game has very gorgeous pixel art, I wish it was slightly higher res, like if they doubled the sprite resolution, simply because it's so low res right now that everything has a super blocky, undetailed look to it, sort of like Risk of Rain 1. Either way, it's hard as well, so Abuse fans might have something to chew on if they need more pain in their lives. Last thing I need to say is I'm really happy that people enjoyed this video. Honestly, the Abuse video was a make or break moment for me and my channel. Literally, if that video had gotten mostly apathy or even potentially negative responses, that legitimately might have been it. I probably would have just said goodbye to the channel. Luckily, you guys were so supportive and amazing that I knew I had to keep uploading content. I've said it before, my community is what brought me back from the dead, and I mean it. The positive reception you've given me has kept me going, and hopefully will keep me going in the future. So yeah, Abuse is a silly little video about a silly little 90s freeware game. I still look back on it fondly. Oh yeah, Metroid Prime Hunters. Sort of like with Halo, this was a childhood game of mine, and I kind of forced myself to be as objective about it as I could. I think a lot of other people also have fond memories of Prime Hunters, considering the response to the video. However, nostalgia aside, yeah, I stick with what I said. Prime Hunters is just kind of boring as a Metroid game. It's poorly paced, sections are way too repetitive, and there's just no flow to it like any other decent Metroid game. The only thing it's got going for it is the atmosphere, which I still think is pretty solid. And it also had the novelty of being a Metroid Prime game on a fucking handheld. If you consider that most people at the time thought of handhelds as the Game Boy Advanced, and then you compared it to this, yeah, I understand why a lot of people were super blown away by this game. But in regards to gameplay, it just hasn't really held up that well. Prime Hunters was kind of part of the handheld trend for a while, where you take a popular game from the console, and then you make a really bare-bones spin-off for the handheld. Although this trend seemed to mostly die off, especially with Nintendo, Sony, meanwhile, never quite got the memo, and I genuinely blame this mentality for the death of the Vita. The problem with these kinds of games is why bother playing them if you can just play their much better big brother on the consoles? The best approach to handheld games is to design a game for the handheld first and foremost, instead of trying to readapt something else. Best example is something like Metroid Fusion or Zero Mission. They weren't trying to be Prime 1 and Prime 2 on the Game Boy. They were their own separate games. That's something Nintendo figured out eventually and why Prime Hunters is an oddity. Because yeah, it's literally just a tech demo. It doesn't hold up at all. Although I'm shocked at just how many people went to my video to make a single one-sentence comment saying that I was wrong and that Prime Hunters was actually really good and won't clarify anything else. So for a tiny little audience of people who also grew up with the game like I did, I think my video may have struck a nerve, which is funny because I'm part of that crowd. I loved Prime Hunters as a kid, and you know what? Its multiplayer is still pretty good. But I saw so many people insistent that Prime Hunters was their favorite Metroid game and wasn't as bad as I said it was. Which, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, I think it's people just referring to their faint memories and nostalgia. I don't believe that of the people who've commented that way, each and every one of them has actually played through Prime Hunters, start to finish, right before they sat down and commented on my video. I just don't believe that. Instead, I imagine that most of their love for the game is entirely in their memories. And if anything, most of you probably haven't touched this game in many, many years, which is fair. Hey, I thought I loved Prime Hunters before I revisited it. However, I now know that was mostly nostalgia. Something people mentioned that I sadly never got around to in making the retrospective is that the multiplayer is still playable. And in fact, I actually spent a bit of time looking to see if I could get a match going. And I might try and play around with it through emulators in the future. We'll see. Playing with bots, the multiplayer does feel more simplistic than I remember, but it's pretty fun. I always thought of it as Quake 3 Lite. With all the weapons and the map layouts, it does feel like a little arena shooter. An arena shooter for kids. I'll add that the lack of any lock-on system actually makes the fighting real and intense. Metroid Prime 2 had a split-screen multiplayer mode, but since you could just lock onto enemies, it turned into this stupid contest of who could press the fire button the fastest. There was nothing competitive about that game. I think a multiplayer mode like this can work, only really if they handle the weapons the same way they did in Prime Hunters. You need multiple beam types that all take ammo. I think that's what Prime Hunters does really well. The last thing of note is that since making this video, the channel Did You Know Gaming made a video about a lost Metroid game, and in grabbing B-roll footage, they used a clip from my Prime Hunters video with me showing off the game from my 3 Nintendo DS's, all the while Vinesauce narrates over the top of it. So yeah, my hands are forever cemented in their video. That's probably the closest I'll get to being internet famous. That's fair. I'm definitely not finished with Metroid Prime. I've gotten more into the Prime series, and I'm excited for Prime 4. I enjoyed the remaster of Prime 1, mostly because it was just an excuse to replay an old game, and I want to make some more in-depth videos about them in the future, so we'll see. Oh man, Redline. First thing, I'll say that despite the rough audio, I still think Redline is one of the best videos I've ever put out, outside of my Halo Infinite reviews. If people ever wonder why I made this channel in the first place and what type of content I was aiming for, Redline is exactly that. A fun retro 90s game with a lot of charm, a lot of weirdness, and quite a few problems. And plenty to talk about too. Some things to mention. First, I was shocked at how many people recognize this game. At some point, it got linked on Reddit, which got me a nice small boost of new subscribers. I didn't make that post, someone else did, so whoever you are, thanks a bunch for that. I learned that Redline has a demo that came packaged with a PC Gamer magazine from way back in the day. I can't find the specific magazine, but I saw a lot of people mentioning that that demo disc is where they first were introduced to Redline. Apparently the multiplayer wasn't half bad either, which I cannot confirm or deny that. I've never played it. Either way, there were a lot of people who had memories of Redline, but had completely forgotten about it, only to then be sharply reminded of it thanks to my video. Guys, I love hearing stories like that. There's always those fleeting games that we have tiny, brief memories of from our childhoods that seem to escape us no matter how far we look. And Redline seemed to be that game for a lot of people. I'm glad I got a lot of people to look at this game too, because Redline was a cult favorite of mine for a long time, and I hope I did it justice in my video. But yeah, everything about it, exploring the game, looking more into its shockingly deep lore, and even touching on the developers, this to me remains the template for my old obscure 90s game retrospectives. Now some things I have to follow up on. Apparently DG Voodoo 2 might help with the frame rate, although once again I can't confirm or deny that, I haven't tested it myself. Also the patch I linked in the video sadly went down, and unfortunately I can't find a fix for it. I'll definitely update the description if I find a new updated widescreen patch in the future, but yeah, come on Night Dive, get on this. Looking back, Redline is a video I could definitely improve upon. However, Redline encapsulates the kind of games that I love covering. Obscure cult classics that are chock full of problems but have a lot of charm. I've definitely branched into covering more modern games, but rest assured, my love of old 90s era PC games like this has not waned whatsoever. And there are many more like Redline, all waiting to be made into a video. There's just too many for me to count. Gunmetal. I still enjoy it. Hell, since making that video, I have gone back to play more of it. And yeah, I still really enjoy it. Also, I still stand by the fact that this game needs a multiplayer mode, or a skirmish mode, or something like that. The more I revisit those old missions, the more I know that this game would be perfect for it. It would have been an awesome game to attempt a multiplayer mode in, and I'm upset that they never did anything with it. It's still one of those Xbox games that I wish would get a proper widescreen 60 FPS port to PC, but as it is now, at least it's playable, which is good enough for me. As with most of my videos, people in the comments pointed out how similar it was to a couple other mech games. The first one was Herzog Zwei, and wow, having actually played it, Yeah, it's kind of shocking how similar the gameplay is. The best way I can describe it is take Gunmetal's gameplay, make it top down, and then add some light RTS elements to it. It was a Sega Genesis game, and from what I've played, the game is very complicated to get into. It's like one of those games that has a high skill ceiling, at least to me, but from the little bit I've played, it is still pretty fun. I think another game that reminds me of both Gunmetal and Herzog's Zwei is Air Mech Strike. It's all about protecting your base, generating NPC allies, fighting against your mech opponent who has his own army you have to fight. It's gameplay that I would love to see revisited in a modern title, perhaps with a nice campaign to go along with it instead of just a duel mode. And I mean that for both Herzog and Air Mech. Another game that a lot of people quite consistently recommended to me after making this video was Battle Engine Aquila. Literally, I see it pop up all the time, and I can see why. It's got the exact same vibe as Gunmetal, the same visual style, similar gameplay. I mean, it's got the same premise of having a transforming mech set in a big sandbox level. I definitely get the comparison, but I don't know if I'll ever make a video on it, mostly in regards to not wanting to copy or steal a video idea, and then just doing the exact same thing with it. Hey, did you know that my first big return video was meant to be The Division? Yeah, a Christmas episode as well, where I tour around snowy New York and interject with the problems of the gameplay, maybe a rant about online-only games, interspersed with a fun showcase of the world. Something like that. But yeah, Christmas video to return to YouTube, right in December of 2021. Then, Ross Scott made a video that exact same month. No shade on Ross, I think his video was probably better than the one I would have made, and he's a big inspiration for this channel. But because of that, I never made the Division video, because I knew I would just be retreading the same content as someone else, especially another content creator who I deeply respect. I'll tell you what though, when I was making my Lost Planet Christmas/New Year's video, you bet your ass I was nervously eyeing his channel to see if he would make the exact same one. It could just be me, I could be the weird one, but either way, I try to make my content stand on its own, and be at least somewhat unique or original. Even look at my Halo videos. Halo is a massively popular franchise, so many videos get made on them. But I never saw a Halo video do a deep dive on why Halo 4 was a bad game, or a long, in-depth review on Infinite. As far as the Halo community goes, all of their content seems to just be these meaningless 5-minute reviews or shit that looks like content farm stuff. I saw an open void, so I filled it with my videos. And as a result, they're some of my most popular reviews on the channel. Looping all the way back around, in growing my channel, I've ran across multiple fellow small channels who do similar content as me, covering old or obscure games. And a few of them also made videos on Battle Engine Aquila, Salokin, RetroGameRater, and Tunuh. Which, by the way, I'll link all their channels in the description if you want to check them out. To me, I genuinely don't want to repeat what other people have been saying about a game. Because do you seriously need some dork making a 30-minute video about a game that you already watched a review on? Exactly. And getting to watch channels like these, it makes me even more aware of what I'd be doing. And I just don't want to get in the way. But yeah, that's probably why I won't cover Aquila. Okay, well, first things first, people were debating me in regards to the fact that I called this game an online-only driving game. Quite a few people, actually. Because yes, technically, it's not an online-only game. Look, you can play offline. However, as far as I'm concerned, it may as well be. So much of the game was tied to the servers that, with them finally gone, the game is essentially a shell of itself. And yes, it was a multiplayer-focused game. But how come you can still play multiplayer in other racing games? There's also personal bias in this video, which I probably should have made clear. Before 2010, the term always online was rare to ever hear about. Barely mentioned outside of stuff like World of Warcraft, or literal online services like 24/7 web assistance or maybe AOL. And young Andy first heard this term from a developer interview years ago, where they talked about implementing it in this brand new open world racing game. The game turned out to be Test Drive Unlimited 2. Anyway, the game is so buggy that even though it's technically playable offline, it really isn't. I still feel bad for making that video because I know full well that a bunch of people are hoping to play the game, only to find out that it doesn't work on their modern graphics card. Seriously, I think you probably have a better chance of playing this game if you're still running on like Windows 7, with an NVIDIA 400 series graphics card or something like that. Hell, even now, I think the only reliable way to play any of the Unlimited games is on console. And speaking of old hardware, in my quest to play TDU1, I got quite a few people recommending I try a virtual machine to play it, which isn't a bad idea, actually. I don't use virtual machines a lot, unfortunately, outside of console emulation, and a VM I ran for Linux back in the day. So I've never tried running old versions of Windows or anything like that. My problem is I know even that solution is finicky because there's no guarantee it's the OS's fault for not running it. It really just might be the graphics card. Plus, I'll be honest, it's a bit of a time-consuming effort to get an old game up and running. Way more than any other game I've messed around with. Which is funny because I do that for a lot of my games. A lot of the retro games I play, I will spend hours getting them set up and running. And yet, even this is probably a step too far for me. If I ever get a chance, or maybe if I get a group of people together, I think a TDU1 revisit might be in order. And that's when I'll probably give it another chance. No promises though. In other news, TDU3 still has not been released yet. There's been gameplay shown off, and yeah, it looks pretty good. Visuals are nice, cars look fun to drive. There's a big focus on multiplayer, which is, I guess, authentic to Unlimited. But it does worry me, given that the game I'm pretty sure is going to be always online. So once those servers shut down, there goes your $60. Actually, I'm really happy that a lot of Test Drive fans are pointing this out as well. The comments on Reddit or the Steam forums are all chastising the developers for this, which I 100% appreciate. A lot of times this stuff goes unnoticed, so I'm glad that people recognize that what happened to Test Drive Unlimited 2 could and likely will happen here. Anyway, Hong Kong looks nice. I will say that the car handling looks shockingly similar to TDU 1 and 2. A little slower, kind of weighty, which does sort of worry me if we're supposed to be driving through highly dense city streets. I'm curious to know how that'll play. I hope it's a good game. It might not be. I don't know. But hey, if they give me a nice open world Hong Kong to explore, then I'm at least satisfied. Oh man, this was a rough video. For starters, October was meant to have 4 retrospectives made for it, and I eventually had to ditch 1, which I might save for a later year, we'll see. 3 out of 4 ain't so bad, but if it sounded like I was maybe tired or worn out from making these videos, that's why. I was rushing to get them out before the month was over, which is definitely the most productive I've been in my fucking life. This was further compounded by the fact that I mistakenly started my Halo Infinite review right around the same time. God, remember when I was going to have those out by September? In the future, I'm definitely going to play it safer with my video schedule, but October is always the exception. I get so many horror games throughout the year that sometimes I just cram them into October. But getting back to Aliens, it was a doozy of a review. When I go into a game, I kind of know what to expect from it. Most of them I've played before, some multiple times, so I know if it's going to be a game I like or a game I'll not like. You kind of know. Aliens was a complete 180, where people liked it, I thought I would love it. Then actually finishing it, I think I kind of dislike it. Maybe even hate it. Although hate's a strong word. There is a reserved list of games that I genuinely hate, and I doubt Infestation makes the list. But it was definitely a disappointment. The fact that the game would break up the Metroidvania sections with these weird linear levels just straight up ruined the pace of the entire game. I think I said that the third act of the game was the best part because that's when it finally opened up and became a pure Metroidvania, letting you explore, backtrack, unlock pathways, get upgrades. I've got a love-hate relationship with WayForward, turning more into one of hate as time goes on, but their older titles, especially from this era, they had some great game design. Yet Infestation just wasn't one of them. And it wasn't because it was hard. I love some of their games that lean on the harder side. It's just that Aliens felt super rushed and kind of visionless at the time. It's a game whose core design documents needed a second pass. I do think there's a great game in here. I love the characters, the atmosphere can be good at times. As I said, exploration is fun. Just the combat is so bad, the bosses are annoying, and the set pieces just ruin the experience. So video-wise, I still stand by what I said. Also, some people think I edited in the end credits song, but I shit you not. That's literally what was on the game cartridge. Otherwise, I think the best part about this video was what went on in the comments. For starters, I got a comment from Larry Bundy Jr., which was pretty rad to see. It's happened a couple times, but it's really humbling when a larger content creator comments on my videos. Otherwise, a bunch of people went to work debating the multiple points that I brought up. Specifically, my questions regarding the Aliens universe and how physics apply to it, like was shown in the first movie. I asked how when you kill a xenomorph, its acid blood doesn't just burn through the hull like it did in the first movie. I'm pretty sure that was the reason it had acid blood in the first place, as an excuse for why the characters couldn't just use a gun to kill it. I got responses from multiple people who said that the molecular acid would eventually burn itself out and stop melting through the floors entirely, which I kind of get that part. Like, I understand it's a chemical reaction and doesn't just go forever, but I always thought that a body-sized amount of acid blood, that would be enough to eat through multiple decks before it'd lose its acidity. We're talking about an entire alien carcass. Someone pointed out that in Fireteam Elite, apparently all the space stations and spaceships in that game are coated with acid-proof metal alloys, which, that's a bit of a hand wave, but at least it's something. So you get a pass, Fireteam Elite. Colonial Marines, you don't. Another person commented that the physics of acid blood don't even really make sense, because apparently that type of acid that you would need that can burn through metal that quickly, if contained in the quantities I was describing, like the size of an alien body, would essentially be so friggin' unstable that one simple exposure to oxygen would just set that acid ablaze and would create an out-of-control chemical fire. That alien, along with anyone close to it, would just be toast. Which I never really thought about. I guess at the end of the day, I'm focusing on a universe that isn't meant to be scientifically accurate. Maybe those silly rubber costume monsters weren't meant to be taken this seriously. Speaking of movies though, apparently, and this is according to a commenter, the blue hue of a lot of James Cameron movies is an after the fact thing. Where after his films were converted to home video and even DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K formats, they still retain the post-conversion color grading. So the theatrical version of his movies apparently had way more subtle coloring. But on home video, they were just smeared with blue. Now even then, Cameron does have a distinct style and he loves his blue gels. But apparently they've kind of worsened in these post-theatrical releases. I was told that Terminator 2 especially had some very rough color grading to it. I had no idea about these specific instances, but it doesn't shock me one bit. I've recently learned that apparently home video conversions are often done by people completely outside of the film's production. Like the director, cinematographer, editor, most of the time, none of them even have access to the movie once it leaves theaters, and it's up to some random dude in an editing bay to convert the film to DVD, which results in movies getting these really awful color grading and color tints to them that they did not have in the theatrical release. It's literally some guy trying to match up the colors the best he can despite having zero involvement in the film in the first place. I think the most famous example of this has to be the original Matrix, which had really natural colors for the theatrical release. Realistic scenery with a hint of green in the background. Not overbearing at all. But when it was brought to DVD, some idiot with a color filter decided to make all the scenes extra green. More vomit green, more ugly green. You can tell it's a post-conversion because the skin tones are all wrong. In the theatrical version, there's a nice red hue to them, like the pink of skin. In the DVD release, they're all green. And what's sad is, I was never a big fan of The Matrix, mostly due to the fact that I never liked how the film looked. But I only saw the film on home video. The Matrix was finally restored through its 4K re-release, with its original color palette. This messes with my brain so much. Not only do I notice it now even further with other films, but it makes me consider just how much of this has affected the public consciousness on certain movies. When the 4K remaster of The Matrix came out, a lot of people complained about it not looking green enough because they were used to the DVD version of the film, not the actual film print that played in theaters. Some movies like Seven straight up don't even have their original color grading anymore. A lot of films have lost theirs to time. So it's this weird case where we only know of a piece of media through its half-assed ugly home video conversion and not the original perfect theatrical version that the director intended, which is insane to me to think about. Oh god, talking about this just gives me more headaches. Let's move on. A commenter did mention an Aliens fan game, Aliens Neoplasma, which is a fan ROM made for the ZX Spectrum. Yeah. It does look cool, and I don't own a ZX Spectrum at all, but if I ever got a virtual machine set up, I might give this game a try. It looks pretty authentic too. During the video, I ran into a music track that sounded eerily similar to a track I heard in a Metroid game, and a couple commenters took to work to track it down, to what I'd say is middling success. The two closest leads we have so far is that the track either originates from the Brinstar Red Soil theme or one of the Meridia themes. It really does sound similar to Brinstar, maybe in another key, but the search is still up in the air. My realistic guess is that it sounds similar to some fan remake of another Metroid track. Lastly, I was asked a question, and it wasn't really an Aliens related question, but more so related to my video editing in general. Tunuh, a fellow YouTuber who I literally mentioned earlier, simply asked how I structure my videos when I write them. And to go into a little more detail, I do my scripted retrospectives and reviews one of two ways. I have a basic review format, point by point, every aspect of a game, gameplay, presentation, story, etc. Or I do a format where I write about my experience in playing a game, from start to finish in linear order, my thoughts on the game as I play it, where my head was at in certain parts. Then I take those review points, like gameplay or graphics or story, but I insert them throughout my playthrough, segueing between topics, using parts of the game as an opportunity to talk about a critique or a mechanic or an aspect that I like, using tangents to briefly review something about it, before then going back into the playthrough. I'll be honest, the latter format is a lot harder to write for, and I'm not even sure if it's that much better. I typically reserve this format for obscure older titles that not a lot of people have played. If I cover a big popular AAA game, yeah, I don't have to go through the campaign step by step. Lots of people have played it already, and I'd be better off if I just focus on the good stuff. But these weirder, older games are journeys. I go through so many different emotions while playing them, and since not a lot of people have played them all the way through, this video format works. I like being able to take my viewers on the same journey that I took. At least that's my mentality. You guys seem pretty evenly split when it comes to what format you prefer, so it's definitely a style I'll hold on to for the time being. Maybe some games still warrant it, but yeah, that's how I handle my writing. Dementium the Ward. Oh man. Well, for starters, as far as games go, this was probably one of the roughest games for me just to play through. Probably on par with Aliens Infestation. I said it in the video, it's a boring slog of a game that, despite having great mechanics, fails to utilize them in any meaningful way, mostly due to the bad, repetitious level design. Yet despite that, I think Dementium might legitimately be one of my favorite videos looking back on it, mostly due to just how chill and relaxed of a vibe the whole review was. I went ahead and added in lots of nice rain ambiance, combined with some Silent Hill tracks, and I think that saved the whole video. Listening back to it, it's a really comfy Halloween video. Some things I should probably mention. First, everyone and their mother said that Dementium 2 was a much better game, and it's worth checking out. People also said not to play the PC port. I kind of figured already. Looking at it on Steam, it has that Unreal Engine asset flip vibe to it, which is not an aesthetic that I like. On the DS, it's a little more consistent with some nice pixel art. So if I ever check out Dementium 2, it'll be through the DS port, or at least through my emulated version of it. Secondly, it's my bad on the final boss. Apparently, if you shoot his hands when he picks you up, you can break free and take 0 damage. So I take it back, the final boss doesn't have an undodgeable attack. Lastly, as I said, I was very negative towards Dementium, although getting to know about the developers kinda makes me regret how scathing the video was. I do kinda feel bad, even if all my criticism was made in good faith. At least I think it was. Jules Watcham and Greg Hargrove were the 2 developers who made Dementium. I think there might have been maybe 3 devs total on the project, but yeah, a team that small, that does explain some things. I definitely wish I looked more into Renegade Kid when I made the video, because they do have an interesting little story. Jules and Greg were former Iguana Entertainment devs, which makes sense on why they chose to develop for the DS. They had experience making FPS games on bad, low-fidelity Nintendo hardware. Jules actually talks about his other projects through his Twitter, mainly a cancelled Wild West FPS prototype that was shopped around on the DS. There was an interview with him, and hearing him talk was really interesting, because he mentioned that the reason Renegade Kid focused entirely on the handheld was because they essentially liked being a big fish in a small pond. They were tiny compared to other AAA studios, but relative to just DS devs, they were the top dogs, especially when you take into account just how optimized and high performance their engine that they used was. Something not even fucking Activision could compete with. It's a really interesting mindset, and I do respect the idea of a studio working entirely within their limits. Although that might have been their ultimate downfall, considering how they eventually split up and have been working on very cheap and obscure indie games ever since. Although a funny little coincidence is that this very interview from Game Explain, talking about their cancelled Western game, they actually pulled and used footage from my Dementium video as their B-roll. I thought I was crazy when I first saw it. I briefly assumed that maybe they used someone else's footage, but then I kind of remembered that not a lot of people emulate this game to HD, and so then I took a look and yep, it's literally my gameplay. So if I had a nickel for every time some channel used footage of me playing a DS game for background footage, I'd have 2, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. Full circle, I guess. The Mummy. Wow, quite a bit to say about this one actually. Looking back, I'm really happy with how this video turned out. When I was planning my Halloween lineup, I was completely unprepared for The Mummy. Literally, I just happened to be playing it, but it was so good that I decided I needed a video about it. In hindsight, I probably should have delayed this video to another year, but man, The Mummy saved Halloween. It was a solid little Metroidvania and I still revisit it. So to follow up on some loose ends in the comments, first in regards to the game's soundtrack, I've been told by people who are self-proclaimed experts in music that the genre I was describing was darkwave. It sounds right to me. But hey, no matter what it's called, it's still an awesome OST to listen to. I'll literally just listen to it in the background. Secondly, I mentioned that a trope of mine that I love, but I wish was expanded on more, was the concept of a military task force fighting supernatural forces. To that end, I got a few people recommending me various games. Clive Barker's Jericho was one, an XCOM mod called the XCOM Files was another. XCOM itself isn't a bad pick, but that's more sci-fi and aliens. To me, I love when military hardware is put up against incomprehensible paranormal horrors. Fear remains my go-to example, so for anyone watching, feel free to recommend more stuff like this. Keep it coming. I can't get enough of it. Lastly, I didn't realize I was going to say something so controversial, but people really took issue with my rant against Alex Kurtzman. And to those who disagreed with what I said, well, there's not a lot I can say to convince you. I think Kurtzman's problem is that he doesn't write stories or characters. He writes scenes. His attitude towards making movies aren't substance, but rather moments that he thinks would look cool out of context, where he thinks something is so cool and badass that he has to include it. Except in the full context of the story, it just feels out of place and embarrassing. In Star Trek, there's a whole action scene where Kirk drives an old 1960s convertible into the Grand Canyon. Aside from the obvious hilarity of there being a canyon this large in Iowa, why include this scene at all? Why do we need something like this in a Star Trek movie? Because Kurtzman thought it would be cool. Completely out of context from the story and not fitting in at all. Why does Tom Cruise have to fight Mr. Hyde in a movie about mummies? Because Kurtzman thought it would be cool. Why does Picard have to die and then be resurrected as a robot? Because Kurtzman thought it would be cool. So yeah, Kurtzman, he's still one of the worst filmmakers out there. It's actually remarkable just how forgettable and bland his movies are, which to me is a clear testament to how bad of a writer he is. Because even the worst writers out there are still sometimes able to make memorable movies and scenes. I actually feel bad for comparing him to Ed Wood, because Wood was actually super passionate about his craft, even if he wasn't any good at it. And say what you will, Plan 9 from Outer Space is still one of the most remembered movies of all time. With Kurtzman though, his type of writing is just bad in that forgettable way, which is why I think a lot of his movies and stuff is genuinely unwatchable, because it's usually boring. Seriously, when's the last time anyone has watched The Mummy? And finally, Lost Planet. Lost Planet was technically a 2023 video. However, I spent the entire month of December and the Christmas season working on it. So as far as I'm concerned, it's still a 2022 video. Some things I should quick mention. First, I think I did strike a nerve with some people about what I said regarding Lost Planet 2. In fact, I was actually really shocked at how many people loved Lost Planet 2. I guess I shouldn't be surprised since that game was definitely trying to be more mainstream than the first one, so I guess more people checked it out. Either way, I did have people throwing their opinions in there that the second game was actually pretty good, and I just haven't played enough of it to form my opinion yet. I was entirely going off of what my friends and fellow Lost Planet 1 fans who played 2 thought of it, and I got a consistent answer, that it was okay, but it felt too different to Lost Planet 1 and lost a bit of the charm, even if it did have good customization options. I also had plenty of people asking me to make a video on it, which, hey, I'd love to, but I really can't. At least I don't think I can. The problem lies in the fact that not only is the game stuck offline, but as it is now, it is a bastard to run apparently. I also had way too many people say that the solution for both Lost Planet 2 and Lost Planet 1 Colonies Edition is to just play it on consoles. Listen guys, I play almost exclusively on PC. That's just how it is. I can record videos at HD and at a high frame rate. I literally don't even have a modern Xbox or PlayStation. The most powerful console I currently have is my Halo Reach Special Edition Xbox 360. I'm not even sure I could get Lost Planet 2 online working for it. Plus, I don't really have any desire in recording and playing a game at 720p at 30 FPS. I will always try to play and record a game on PC. So only until it gets patched on PC, or maybe I can mess with the FOV settings, will I ever make a Lost Planet 2 retrospective. I do want to make it though. The second thing I wanted to mention was Lost Planet 1's multiplayer. I barely even brought it up, much to the surprise to a lot of Lost Planet 1 fans. I knew a lot of people who only saw Lost Planet as a multiplayer game. And yeah, I really wanted to cover the multiplayer as well. Maybe get some footage of it. I played the original multiplayer on the 360 as a kid, so I wanted to show it off. I went so far as to gather a group of people who wanted to play Lost Planet 1 on Steam with me, as well as buying, ordering, and shipping a disc of Colonies Edition, in case I wanted to check out that multiplayer instead. In fact, it was getting this all set up that kind of delayed the Lost Planet video, and it's why it didn't come out on Christmas. However, these plans completely fell through, and they fell through so badly that honestly, it sounds like I'm making it up. And I even get angry when I think back to it. To start off, my Colonies Edition copy never arrived. Like, literally never showed up. I bought it from what I thought was a dependable seller, only to have the disc never arrive and for the seller to completely fuck me over out of my game. Then after that, after gathering my friends together ready to play Lost Planet, I just could not play online whatsoever. Yeah, I still have no idea, but Lost Planet 1's multiplayer literally doesn't work for me and just me. I'm the only human being on the planet apparently who can't play online. I can't host a server. I can't join a server, not even if we use something like Hamachi. Of course, my friends could join and play, just not me. I did all the proper steps to host a server too. I opened up the correct ports, I was super thorough about it, and to my annoyance, nothing about it worked. My only guess is that my particular ISP, just for whatever reason, is incompatible with the Lost Planet servers. I have Xfinity, by the way. And I know I'm going to get so many comments of people trying to say that I can fix it with some random solution. But guys, I've tried all of them. Nothing works. I followed every guide, every forum post. I literally can't get this game working. And apparently I'm the only person on the planet who has trouble with it. So we never played multiplayer because I literally can't play it. And I probably never will. Maybe if some egghead can help me figure out how to get it up and running, I can have fun with the multiplayer again. But as it is, I don't think I'll ever be able to play Lost Planet PvP, which is sad. So yeah, that's why there was no multiplayer in the video, because Capcom literally hate me and me specifically. I'm glad my friends at least had fun without me. I did punish them in the end though, because they were the same group of people that I got together to play Halo Infinite with. I'd say they suffered an even worse fate than I did. But yeah, kind of a bummer that we couldn't play Lost Planet online, because a lot of people had pretty strong feelings towards it. There are still entire communities dedicated to keeping it alive, even if I can't play with them. As for the rest of the video, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. This was a retrospective that really went viral, eclipsing most of my other vids. I'm not really sure why. I guess there was just an influx of people who really wanted to watch a video about a decades-old 360 game. Just works that way sometimes. It was at least a fun game to talk about. Sort of me branching into well-remembered but slightly forgotten mainstream titles from the early 7th gen, which is a period of time that was super formative to me as a gamer. And Lost Planet was a video I had on the back burner for a while. I just had strong opinions on it. If I could change one thing about my entire video, I did go into a rant about East versus West game design. I used that clip of Phil Fish, which I actually saw a few people defending him. And at this point, I'm like, what are you guys even arguing for? You got your wish. Japanese devs are already worsening their games just to appeal to you. That part of me ripping into Phil and lunatics like him, I still 100% stand by. The westernization of Japanese games, and pretty much any other foreign games for that matter, is a fucking plague. And if anything, this stuff has only gotten worse. A lot of games getting butchered remakes, and especially localizations. That's become a big hot topic lately. However, what I said in the video was that I had faith in Capcom in not falling into the same pitfall they fell in years ago. There was a brief moment where it seemed like they were on the right track, and in the video I was pretty optimistic about their future. Well, I hate to burst my own bubble, but yeah, I don't have that optimism anymore. Recently they've been pretty hellbent on returning to their bad practices, and it seems like they've already gotten worse. Only time will tell, of course, but yeah, I take back fully what I said about modern Capcom. They are still just as misguided as they were when they were making shit like Lost Planet 3. And yes, I still think Phil Fish was an ass. And I do think there's some weird prejudice a lot of American developers have towards Japanese devs. As for why, I just can't explain it. You see it a lot with localizers. People who think that Japanese games need to be censored, like there's something wrong with them. To that, I'd say go watch Dimitri Monroe's excellent video all about shit like that. I had no idea this kind of stuff was happening. Oh yeah, I also made some videos with Burke. For those who don't know, Burke is a close friend of mine, and we talk about games. A lot. So much so that I decided to put our conversation into a video. I did it a couple times. Then I did it as an April Fool's joke. I think they came out pretty good. Unscripted long discussions, not as popular as my main content, but overall, people seem to enjoy them. Although I should clarify why they were made at all. Mainly two reasons. First, I thought at the time it would be an easy, or at least somewhat easier to make video format, so that I could put out more videos in between longer retrospectives. Another reason was I thought it might give me a chance to talk about more mainstream games. Remember, most of the games I had made retrospectives on before that video were obscure old titles, simply because I wanted to have something to say. You take any big, well-known game, and making yet another review video on it just becomes redundant. I literally said this earlier, you end up just repeating or saying the same talking points as someone else. So I thought a format of two guys sitting down to talk about it would at least make for something unique. After the Left 4 Dead discussion, I got more into my reviews, and I've also been making retrospectives on more mainstream AAA games. So now these videos kind of just exist as an experiment more than anything. And you know what? Yeah, I will still absolutely make more videos with Burke. Just I think our topics might be a little more different. The problem became evident when it turned out that, no, these videos aren't easier to make. They take just as much time as my other content. So what was meant to be an easy to make video, reminiscent of an unscripted podcast, turned into just another huge hour-long video project to make alongside my current projects. Either way, it seems you guys mostly enjoyed them. People called them podcasts, and I guess it's a fair description. There's a lot of older games which are fun to chat about and have an unscripted discussion over. I'm also extremely disappointed in the quality of gaming podcasts and content similar to it that just don't quite fill the void. At least what I'm specifically looking for. All the channels and podcasters out there are very corporate, brand-safe accounts, or people who talk about news and rumors. Super recent stuff. Stuff that gets clicks, which, that part I understand. Essentially, I want stuff like this but geared towards old games, towards classic titles, or just funny inane topics. This is what made me make these videos. That's why we're going to keep making more. They're fun to make, even if they take a lot of effort to actually edit them. So yeah, expect more content like this in the future. You haven't seen the last of Burke. And that's all I have for today. I'm ending it here because even though I have quite a few other more recent videos, this video is already pressed for time. Plus, those retrospectives are so fresh in my brain that I need time to let them simmer, if you will. I'll make another follow-up. Who knows when? Maybe in a year. Maybe sooner. I'll definitely be making a dedicated Halo follow-up soon. So don't worry, you guys. But yeah, that's all I had to say. 2022 was an incredible year for me, and it's definitely one of the most important years of my life that I can even remember. So much has happened and changed, all pretty much for the better, and I'm so happy that I got to experience it. When I talk about how you guys saved this channel, I really mean it. Were it not for the support that you all gave me in my return, I totally would have just left this channel in the dust. Because not all of my videos reach massive numbers. But that's okay to me. Only a few break into the algorithm. That's just how it is sometimes. But even with my smaller videos, the stuff that's not as popular, I still make it for an audience in mind. I make it for you guys. I put out content for you guys because I know that even if there's only a handful of people enjoying it, those are a handful of people worth keeping around. So for making these last couple years a friggin' blast, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Each and every one of you. All of you viewers and commenters and patrons for keeping me going. It's thanks to you guys that I even have fun doing this. And I am more than happy to give you guys more content. Well, that's it. That's all I got. Quite a few retrospectives and reviews are on their way for fall. I'll try and get them out in an orderly schedule, but you know how it is. In the meantime, take care, dudes. I'll see you next time.